Okay, for this last video, I'm going to show you how you're going to add a software instrument and actually play in stuff yourself as part of this project. Okay, so here we are with the thing we just made with loops, and maybe I want to add on something that I'm going to play in with my keyboard. So the first thing I need to do is add a track. I need to add a software instrument track, and you can add a track by going to the top of the track list and hitting the plus button. That will bring in this drop down that you see every time you start a new project where it asks what type of track you want, and you can then choose that. So the different tracks we have is software instruments, external MIDI, that's if you're playing like with a hardware synthesizer outside of your computer, audio, which if you're recording audio, guitar, bass, well obviously if you're recording a real guitar or bass, not a software instrument, and then a special type of track called drummer, which we'll get to later. So I want software instrument. Again, if you have details open, you can see what instrument will be added. I like it to be on empty channel strip because if it's on default, it's always going to start with an electric piano. Unless you want an electric piano, you're going to have to change that anyway. So empty channel strip is good to go. So click create. And I've got this, it put it in here because I had as my second track because I had apparently my first track selected, but I can just drag that down if I don't like the order. I can just put it wherever I want. So I've got it down the bottom. Now to choose an instrument, I need to go to my library browser. So that's this first button up here. Click that, and I've got lots of different instruments. Maybe what I want to add here is some strings. So I'm going to go to, I can go to orchestral, and I've got strings there. I might even have it under cinematic. Has various textures. So I'm going to go to orchestral. I'm going to say strings, and I'm going to choose some strings. I've got lots of choices, but I'm going to try pop strings. It'll take just a second for it to load up a sound. And if your MIDI keyboard is turned on and operating, you should, as soon as it's loaded up, be able to play some notes. Okay, now if you haven't really played a keyboard that much, that's okay, especially for this project. It doesn't have to be a very complicated part. You just kind of want to experiment until you get something that sounds good. So I'm going to get to this point here, bar 5, and so I'm going to try to find some note that I think sounds good. Okay, that note kind of feels like it fits in the key, so let's back this up. I'm going to hit play, but I'm going to play along. I'm not recording yet. Okay, so I, of course, kind of had an idea of what I was playing, but you can just keep on experimenting until you get stuff that seems to sound right. So once I get it there, I can record it. Or once I've kind of figured out, practice it, I can record that. If you mess up, I'll show you how you can easily fix something like that. Okay, so I'm going to get it where I'm ready to start. I'm actually going to have it to where it is going to play me 4 beats, so it's going to kind of back up to here. When it starts recording, and then it'll start recording here at bar 5. My metronome, I probably want it, well, I don't really need my metronome because I've got enough everything else with the drums and bass to really feel the beat, so I don't really need the metronome on at all, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to right click to make sure it's not going to click while recording, but again, if it does, that's no big deal either. So I've got it ready. Here's what I want to record. If I hit record, it's going to back up 4 beats, and then it'll give me time to kind of get ready with my notes. Got a little fancy there at the end. All right, so as you can see, this looks very different because I recorded MIDI notes, not audio. So I wasn't recording actual sound, I was just recording what keys am I pressing down. So you can see that it's just drawn as lines, not an audio waveform. If I made a mistake, I should have made a mistake on that recording so I could fix it. But if I did, I can double click on it. I could, of course, always go back and re-record. But you may just want to fix something if it's a small one. So if I double click on it, it brings up this editor window where I can actually see the notes that I played in a little more detail. And on any of these notes, I can click on them and drag them up or down to change notes. Let's say I had played that note. What did that sound like? Oops, that's a wrong note. So I wouldn't have to necessarily go back and re-record that if that had been my wrong note. I could just go in here and say, no, that was supposed to be there. So you may have noticed that when I rewound and started right here, that was in the middle of a note, so we didn't hear anything. And that's because for MIDI commands, it has to get that, when do I start playing the note? And that command to start playing the note was a little bit earlier, at the beginning of bar 5. So it had to wait until we got to bar 7 to get a new command to play a new note. Okay? I can also adjust the length if that was too long or too short. I can drag the edge and go back and forth on the length of that too. The color that you see on here has to do with velocity or how hard I struck the keys. The more red the color is, the harder a note was struck. The more bluish green, the softer a note was struck. So it just allows you to have a little more variety on how well you play something. So not at all difficult to edit if you make some type of error with that. Now, one of the big advantages, I'm going to get rid of this edit screen. I'm going to click the scissors tool up here. One of the big advantages to MIDI tracks is that if I decide I don't like that instrument, I want that to be something different, I won't have to re-record it. What I've recorded is just what notes should I play. But I can change the instrument to anything I want. So this track is selected already. It had pop strings. Maybe I want to change it to one of these others. Or maybe I want to go even further. I'm going to scroll to the left, start over kind of again. And maybe I want a synthesizer sound there instead. Let's do, how about a experimental sound, Falling Razor. Well, that's very different. Same notes, but completely different sound, right? Let's go to something else. These are crazy because they're experimental. Let's go to classics. Kind of like that big pulse wave. See how that sounded. Can get that set with your volume level how you like it. Could also maybe pan any of these to the left or right to make them a little more interesting sounding sonically. But so here's one thing. If I heard this, I like this sound. But maybe I decide I wish that was an octave higher. I want it to be a higher version of the same notes. I could double click and I could drag these up from here to. I could do that manually, but because we did it earlier with these region pitch changes, I could actually click on the region to highlight it. I could go to this region area and I could say, transpose that up an octave. And it was just that simple. I didn't have to drag around a bunch of notes. You see here the region is saying that is plus 12. So these are ways that you can also add in a MIDI track. And don't worry about if at this point you don't feel really comfortable adding notes. It can be fairly simple of what you're playing. It just does kind of need to go along with whatever other loops that you've put into that. Okay, so have fun creating your first project using loops and at least one software instrument.